Well, that was like at least 5 minutes of my intro gone, so we can get right into it. Nice to meet everybody. Thanks for sticking around. It's like 75 degrees on a Saturday, so I appreciate that everyone is hanging out for a little bit to go to a few more talks and learn a little bit about monorepos with me. So before we even get into it, because I'm interested to find out, how many people actually know what a monorepo is? Okay, nice. I like it. Has people heard of Turborepo? Have you used Turborepo before? Heard of it? Heard of it. I love it. Okay, we have a couple people. Sweet. So we're going to cover all that, don't worry. But why this is relevant, this is Turborepo. This is an open source project that was acquired by Vercel about 2 years ago. It originally was named Turborepo, the actual repo name. Now it's just called Turbo. Last October, we had a big conference called NextConf, mostly targeted towards Next.js, but some other announcements as well that Vercel puts on. And there was an announcement of Turbo Pack, which is a bundler. It was all merged into one repo just called Turbo. So Turborepo and Turbo Pack now live right alongside each other. But huge open source project, 20,000 stars. It's gotten a lot of traction. This is me. So I've been working at Vercel for about a year. First month or so, I was just doing kind of some front-end development, and then I pivoted to the Turborepo team because I've had some past experiences with monorepos, so I kind of really like that development style and really got involved with the team pretty quickly. So, give you a little bit of intro about myself. As you mentioned, worked at SurveyMonkey for about 4 years, doing mostly back-end work originally, brief stint at Under Armour doing primarily front-end. Back to, this is a company called Momentive, SurveyMonkey's parent company, where I did mostly platform work. So building our next generation web platform, GraphQL, React in a monorepo. So I've got a little bit more experience there. And then for the past year, been working at Vercel. And I've lived in Lancaster since about 2021, just about. Loved it here, just starting to get more acclimated to the tech scene. So just glad I found this conference. But anyway, let's get into the talk. So what are we going to talk about today? First, we'll talk about monorepos. We'll talk about what they are, who's using them, why you might want one. And next, we'll talk about Turborepo. What's different between a monorepo and a Turborepo? Why you might want to use that, how it works. After that, we'll do a quick demo. We'll see how it works. I was working on it maybe 10 minutes before this, so it's very likely to explode, which is always fun. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes. We can chat about whatever you're curious about. Okay, perfect. So let's talk about monorepos. What are they? I hate starting with definitions, so I'm going to start with the definition. Repository containing multiple logic projects. That's all it is. So I'm sure you're used to, if you create an app, if you create a package, throw it in a repo. It's pretty standard way to go about organizing things. So a monorepo is everything, every app, every package, you put it all in one place. Why would you want to do this? I'll get into that in a little bit, in a few more minutes. But like, for example, a common structure of what this would look like is just a directory. Top level directory, you're going to have all of your apps under apps. You might have all of your packages under packages. So these might be NPM packages, internal packages, configs. All of your apps are going to be individual deployable, APIs, web apps, anything like that. So for example, we can look at, this is React, relatively well-known package owned by Facebook. React is a monorepo. If you look, we have packages right here. If we drill into packages, you can see these are all either published to NPM packages or just internally shared packages. And they keep them all within the same repository. So all within Facebook React, but everything is organized within there. So why would you want to do this? This is the meat of monorepos in general. The single source of truth. So if we're all computer scientists, software engineers, we're all very lazy at heart, and we've all also been taught forever, don't repeat yourself, right? Never repeat yourself. If you have some data in one place, you need it in 2 different places, for example, a configuration set, images, assets, anything, don't copy and paste it. Try and have a single source of truth. Because then if you need to update it in the future, it's all going to synchronize seamlessly. You're not going to have to worry about things getting out of sync, things drifting, bugs. You forgot you had copied it over here, and then it gets all out of whack. So one really nice thing about monorepos is you can keep everything in one single place, reference it there, and then when you need to update it or change it, once and done. You also get atomic changes. This gets really nice when you have multiple packages or applications that you're sharing between, that you're all intermingling with your other applications. If you need to make it a change, it's one commit, updates everywhere. You don't have to worry about going from one to the next, deploying, or you can take advantage of whatever change you might need to do. You also get a lot of easier dependency management. If you need to make sure that you have the same version of React, Express, whatever you might be using in your repo, it's very easy to do this in a monorepo because you can have singular sources for tracking your dependencies, and there's tools out there to help you keep these in sync as well. Code sharing is also very easy. You see this a lot with things like design systems. On the front end, you might need 50 components, and then all of the apps that use those components can also be in the same repo. They get those updates immediately. You also get the benefits of being able to test immediately. If you make a change, everything that's consuming that is in the same place. You can run tests in one place. You don't have to release the package, consume the package, run the tests, find out you broke something, roll it back. Just a huge pain. Refactoring is also easy, kind of along the same vein as testing, like I was just mentioning there. Searching is also really simple. You don't have to use GitHub's organization search or download a bunch of repositories and grab through them. You can just search all in one repo. Question in the back?
Just because of having, I've never used Monorepo, having a little bit of difficulty understanding how this works.
Yeah.
Especially with the versioning stuff. Does doing things this way preclude, say I have a bunch of libraries that I've written and
sure.
it's in the packages directory.
Sure.
Does this preclude having those be versioned?
No, not at all. You can do it both ways. So it's a great question, actually, that I was going to get to in a little bit, but I like it. So yeah, you can do it both ways. If you're just consuming the package internally, it's much easier to just not version it at all, because when you make changes, if the only consumers are within the same repo, you can take care of any breaking changes that might come up at that moment, and hopefully you might have test failures. So you don't really need versioning. If you're publishing it and you're consuming it internally, then yeah, it's good to version it still, because then you can continue with like Semver if you're using that, and make sure that you are also broadcasting to external consumers who are not in your repo, hey, this is a breaking change or similar. But if you're just within the same repo, it's actually one of the nice benefits. You can just not even care about versions, leave everything at 0.0 if you want, or increment it if you want, but it's not necessarily relevant for anyone who's consuming it. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So, who's using monorepos? Some companies, a couple. Google is pretty well known for using a monorepo there. Google does everything at a different scale, and storing their code is no exception. They have their own version control, they have their own build system, because they store like billions of lines of code in a single repository, and it gets to be a nightmare to work with that. Uber, Airbnb, Microsoft, or so. Of these in this list, Google and Microsoft have developed their own tools for managing monorepos, because it gets hard, it gets tricky, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So you need a little bit of extra tooling around it to make it work, but it's generally worth it for the benefits. There's also some other popular open source tools. Can you tell I'm a JavaScript engineer? All of these are very JavaScript focused, but yeah, so React, Babel, Jest, Next, all utilize monorepos. So let's talk about the problems that you get when you use monorepo, because it sounds great, you get to share everything, it's awesome, but then where does it get hard? So the first one, how, when to build apps and packages. When you have everything in the same repo, you can't just say build, because everything will build and you're going to wait exponentially longer. You might have only changed one app, but you don't want 15 apps to build if you have all that many in your monorepo. So trying to orchestrate what builds and when. It can be hard to scale it organizationally, because again, you went from having a bunch of people living in their own separate rooms, their own separate repos, and you just shoved them all into the same giant room, and everyone's trying to get along together. So it can be a little bit tricky to scale. It can also be expensive a lot of times because, and these are all kind of organizational difficulties. It can be expensive because these big tools that you usually have to use to manage monorepos can be really complicated and hard, and you need like a full DevOps team to maintain them, to keep them and running, just to try and stay on top of keeping the build system and the Monorepo up and running. The tooling is hard. We'll talk about tooling on the next slide, but there's previously just been a couple tools to do this. You also have a single point of failure. Everything's in one repo. You break the build system, tough. You got to fix it before you're up and running again. And then ownership is the last one. Ownership is also hard. It's easier when you have the boundaries of a repository. This team owns this team owns this. When it's just a folder and you have a whole broader system to worry about, it can be a little bit trickier, and there's different tools to do that. But real quick, let's look at the tooling landscape. Bazel, it's known as Blaze internally, is Google's system. They open sourced it as Bazel that they use to manage their monorepos. And we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by managing here in a second. Buck is Facebook's. Same concepts. They use these to kind of manage build order, caching, organizational structures within the repo. Gradle, this is more of a Java-focused one. You might be familiar with this. Learnout, this is a popular open source one that was acquired by a company called Narwhal about a year ago. But what about for us? So I've just told you, monorepos are expensive. They're really hard. There are some benefits, but they don't really have to be. So there's a lot of new tools that have kind of come up in the past year or so to try and solve this problem, because previously they've been just big company problems. Big companies are willing to invest in solving this problem to get those benefits, but they've also, they haven't really trickled down to smaller teams or smaller people or just the individual developer. So we've got a couple of different tools that have come up. NX, Monorepo, most recently the tool that has come up is Turborepo. Just gotta love transitions, right? All right. So what is Turborepo? So a little bit of marketing copy. The website says this: it's a high-performance build system for JavaScript and TypeScript code bases. What does that mean? It's a little bit confusing. So at its core, Turborepo is just kind of a task runner, but it's very smart about how it does things. So tasks, what do I mean by a task? Well, if you have a JavaScript, TypeScript code base, you have a package JSON, you're probably familiar with that. That might contain some tasks like this. You're going to have to install, you might want to lint your code, you might want to build your code, you might want to test it. That's very simple when you're in a single repo. You're only running these scripts. But when you have multiple apps, multiple packages in the same repo, all of a sudden order matters. And Turborepo is aware of the order of your tasks because it understands the dependencies between them. So if you have an app that references a package, they both have to build. It understands that dependency graph, and it will then be able to build the dependencies first before it builds your top-level package, so everything is able to build it. So this does mean it requires a package JSON. This is something we're working on to target more languages, probably this year. But as of now, it still does require package JSON. And it's also just a build system, so it handles task orchestration as well as scheduling. So kind of how I mentioned before, it knows the order of your dependencies, so it knows the order of when to run your tasks. It also understands what can run concurrently and what can't, what needs to block and what can be in parallel. And it will schedule them as optimally as possible so you get the fastest build possible. Okay, so we were discussing a little bit what Turborepo is. Let's talk a little bit about what it's, oh, and also, yes, the orchestrates task I talked about. But let's talk a little bit about what it's not. This can be helpful because I feel like Turborepo is not really the best name in the world. It's not a repository organizer. It has nothing to do with that. You can organize your repository however you want. That top-level apps and packages, we just kind of recommend because it keeps things very simple, a good kind of separation of concerns. It's not a bundler. We talked about this at the beginning briefly, but you may have known about Turborepo's sister in the repo, TurboPack, our Square friend. TurboPack is the bundler. We do have integrations planned with TurboPack in the future. We can get into that later if there's some questions, but for the sake of time, I'm going to leave that one off for now. It's also not a package manager. You still need to use something like NPM, something like Yarn, or PNPM. So it won't do installs for you or anything like that, but once you have installed, you set up the repo, and you have your tasks anyway, the Turborepo will take care of that. Okay, so you might be wondering, like, well, okay, it seems like it just does like very few things. It runs tasks, okay, big deal. It's just a little tiny tool, and that's kind of the point of Turbo. There's a lot of the other Monorepo competitors like Bazel or like NX. If you've ever taken a look at them, the scope of them is huge, and it takes forever to figure out how you need to configure your repo to get it set up. To work with this, you need plugins, you need extensions. Like, they have to adopt whatever you're using before you can use them, and it gets too much too quick. So the kind of the beauty of Turborepo and the space we're trying to fit in is that it's just very lightweight. You can incrementally adapt it, and it works with all your own tools. We don't bring a lot of baggage with us. We're very fast and small. So just throw us in the repo, and then hopefully everything else should already work. When new tools come out, you don't need to wait for us to adopt them. It should automatically work because it works on the same principles as just the node package system. So what are some of the features? We'll look at these. Task pipelines. So kind of how React was a little bit, and again, I'm going more in JavaScript metaphors here, but kind of how React was a little bit revolutionary for front end, where it has a declarative way of writing code instead of imperative. This is the same way. Instead of having a bunch of build scripts or shell scripts where you're saying, okay, package X build, and then when you're done, package Y build, you can just tell Turbo, hey, all of the packages that have build them based off their dependency graph, and it will just update off of that. So it understands, again, we've talked about this, understands the dependencies, so it knows the order to build. All you have to tell it is, I want every package with a certain task, figure out its order to build in. And we'll look at this in a second. It automatically builds dependency graphs to know it needs to be rebuilt and when. And it does automatic parallel execution. So we have some fancy graphs here for that. So if you're just writing your own scripts or you're using just vanilla package manager runners, if you have two apps, we have like an example app at the top and then a svelte app at the bottom, maybe web and apps, and then a package in the middle. If you're trying to lint, build, and test all at the same time, it doesn't know how to optimally schedule them because, again, it doesn't know what depends on what. So if you drop Turborepo into the mix, it can sort it out, and it can compress your build time way, way down because it knows, hey, packages shared needs to be built before apps and web can be built. So it builds that first, runs everything else that doesn't have any dependencies immediately in parallel, then it builds apps and docs next, and it cuts your build time almost in half. Let's see, next. Caches the output of each task. This is kind of the fun hidden feature of Turborepo. Not really hidden, we talk about it a lot. But it's something that's really kind of nice. And again, tasks being install, lint, build, test, or literally any task you can put in your package.json, we can cache. So how do we do that? It's just a cache just a cache that you would be used to from like any concept of software engineering. This is kind of what it looks like. Say you're running a build task. Every time Turbo runs, it creates a hash for your task. So that's what this little 78 NVK string is here. How it builds this hash, it can tell us what your inputs to your build are. So we automatically determine this based off of all of the files that are in your workspace, and we will look for changes in them to see if, hey, has this changed since the last time we've seen it? And we will pull that all into a hash. We check our cache every time we run this with our key. This is essentially a cache key. We'll look and see, do we have the output of this stored? If not, we'll just run it, and then we'll cache it. So the next time that you come around, it just looks like this. You get the same hash because you haven't changed any of your inputs. We have that output, so we just immediately give it back to you. You get an 80 millisecond build instead of the one previously, which was slower, almost 10 seconds. Because we've saved those outputs locally. So then that immediately speeds up your Monorepo build process because all of a sudden you don't really have to care about building only a couple things at a time. You can build everything, and if it hasn't changed, we just hit cache, we return in under a tenth of a second, and you're set. Okay, remote caching. So exactly what we talked about before, but multiplayer version. So what this looks like is, say you have a bunch of different machines, everybody's using the same thing, you're working on the same repo, you're building the same tasks. Cool. We all got cache misses here on this build, so 9 seconds for all of us. You can use remote caching with Turborepo, and you share the same cache. Vercel has one, there's open source ones available as well. So then, number one gets a cache miss, 9 seconds, but he pushes that output up to the cloud, to Vercel. Everyone else who builds, they don't have to. They just get a cache hit immediately, because it's automatically stored. This results in some pretty fun numbers. We do track how much time we've saved because we know how long it took that first build to run. We track that alongside with the artifact, and then every time that you pull that artifact down, we give you a little incremental number about, hey, you didn't have to build that, you saved X amount of time. So this equates right now to about 62 years of compute time saved, and we've only been running for like a year. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, and it's just really fast. That's kind of the main takeaway. So let's look back real quick at our list of the problems for Monorepos. We went through these earlier, but you throw Turborepo into the mix or a similar tool, we can kind of take all of these out of the way because it knows when to build. It makes it a little bit easier to scale because, again, you don't have to worry about running when you're building things. You can just let it build everything, and it will only build what it has to. You don't need a whole team to run it. You don't have to worry about all your different tools. You do still have some problems. Single point of failure, ownership. These are not solved by Turborepo. There are other tools out there that try and do this, add additional kind of mechanisms for assigning ownership within the same repo. But that's not something that Turborepo will cover. So let's see about a demo. This is where everything goes bad. But I was trying to come up with a good example for a demo. And I am a pretty big foodie in Lancaster. Capilar is my favorite. Oh, wait, hold on. I have to share my screen. Capilar is my favorite place to eat. So I was thinking, what could we do with a... There we go. All right, what could we do that would involve some local places that I like going to get lunch, just for fun. So Capilar is my favorite place. One of my other favorite places is the Horse Inn. I don't know if you all have been there. If you don't, if you've never been, if you're in town, check them out. So I was kind of curious if I could pull their menus programmatically to build my own kind of consolidated view. And as it turns out, they both use Toast, which is nice. So I was checking this out this morning, and if we look, made the wrong thing bigger. There we go. So if we look when we load this, let's look at fetch, we'll reload this. As it turns out, Toast just uses GraphQL to fetch everything. So I can look and I can see my order history, I can see, and this is all publicly available. I can also get all of their menu information is all here. So I decided it would be kind of fun to build a little application that, is this big enough for everyone? Should I make it bigger? Bigger. Bigger. Oh, hold on. I can do this. No. Hold on, there's a presentation mode. There we go. Does that work? Okay, cool. So, let's see. All right, so I decided to rip out their little query that they were using from to hit Toast, the API, and then I just built a little app around this really quick to, here we go. This is the GraphQL query if you're curious. And then all that this does, more or less, this is an XJS app. I have a restaurant route here on the right. It's server-side rendered, so on the server it will fetch whatever restaurant you ask it for, and it will also fetch all of them if you'd like, and it will merge it together. So this is, again, it's just a single app. So let me show you real quick the demo here. So I'm just going to do dev. Now this should be running over here. So this is, I call it Tom's Mega Menu. this is a consolidated menu of both of those restaurants. So we're fetching all their items from them, so I can look at just one here. Here we go. So these are only the items from Cavalier, or I wanted to look at Horse Inn. These are just the items from the Horse Inn, and if I wanted to look at all of them, I can do all of them, and it merges the two together, so like you can see Horse Inn is the only one that has pictures here. Cavalier clearly does not for all of them, and we're looking at out of stock. And, those components are very, very simple. This is just the group, this is the item, so some simple React, and these are the types that I wrote here for the data that comes back. So this is great, this is cool, but it's a single app. Fun fact, if you have a single app and you still want to use Turbo, you can still use Turbo to run your tasks. So I could run, for example, Turbo build here. Turbo, you're going to see we still have a cache, and I can make this bigger, sorry. We have a cache miss because Turbo doesn't know anything about this repo. It's trying its very best to just do what it can. It'll run the task. It'll try and infer as much information as it can, but we have told this repo nothing about Turbo. It's not even installed. It's just installed globally. There's no config. There's nothing. But you can still use it at the bare minimum to run your tasks. Do I have lint in here? I do have lint, so I can run a lint task here as well. But if I run these repeatedly, nothing fun is happening here. So I could change that. I could add a Turbo.json in here, but that's not really that exciting. Let's move this to a Monorepo. So I have a demo Monorepo here, which I already pre-set up to just to avoid having to go through all the boilerplate because nobody likes to sit and watch all of that. So this is the same app from before that I just was demoing, except now I have all of the logic moved out to a shared package, which is right here. So this restaurant data package here actually lives down here in packages as restaurant data, and all of this information is here. This was previously in the other app in the lib directory. So now this allows me to share this really easily. And you had your question earlier, do you need to version it? I'm not publishing this right now, so I've just left the version as 0. And then the nice thing about that is every app that consumes it also doesn't have to care about publishing it. So, or I'm sorry, the version, I can just say that this is a workspace package and just give me whatever version you have. Since they're not changing, it doesn't really matter. So I think my mega menu is going to hit the big time. I want to break it out to its own API. So this is an Express API, which I'm also consuming this package in. I'm using this in restaurant data, this fetch. This is using this GraphQL request library, which is isomorphic, so you can use it on the client or the server, which is nice. So I just have a little server here, and in this Express route, I'm using those same functions that, again, I'm pulling from my shared resource here. And I don't have Turbo in here, so let's see what one of the big, let me get rid of this. Let me see what one of the actual issues is of not using Turbo real quick. So, for example, let me check out my Monorepo. Okay, so I just want to build my app. I don't care about writing my build scripts or anything like that. I have my API and my app in there. So let me jump to my app and just do npm build. This is going to explode on me because can't find module restaurant data or its type declarations. That's because restaurant data has to be built. It has a build script. It hasn't been built. So if I jump out to packages, restaurant data, I build this. Great. I jump back to my app. I build it now. It's going to work. But that sucks because I have to know what kind of going to work. I have to know what needs to be built when. And so that's exactly what Turborepo is, or one of the many features of that Turborepo is trying to solve. So let's add this in here real quick. I can add a Turbo.json. And so in here, we're just going to describe to Turbo what our repo looks like and how we're going to set up these dependencies. So if I take a look at my package, restaurant data, it just has a build script. It's using TSUp, which is just wraps ES build to So compile, transcript, and bundle. And in my app, it also has a build script. So I can just tell Turbo, actually, let me get the schema here. Here we go. So we're going to simplify this a lot, but this is what a Turbo JSON looks like. You just have a JSON schema, and then you can give it a pipeline, and I'm going to tell it, hey, for the build task, these are the outputs. This is for caching. You don't need this. If you're not caching, you can comment that right out, and we'll do that for now. But I'm going to say it depends on build. But I want to put a little caret in front of this, because this means if I put a little caret in front of build, this is telling Turbo, for everything that has a build script, look into its dependencies. If that dependency exists in the Monorepo, build it first. So it will build a graph. It'll walk all the way down to the bottom, start the build, walk all the way back up. So it will build dependencies first until it gets back to the root, and it'll run its build then. So this is all I need to do. If I come to packages, restaurant data, I get rid of dist because that's what our published output is. And I get rid of this just to simulate a clean build. So now I'm back in app. I can just run turbo build, and it'll know it needs to build restaurant data first, and then it builds app build next. So now it doesn't matter what directory I'm in, what I'm building. All I have to do is run turbo build. Easy, it's done. If I run this again, it's not. It is cached because I have a turbo in here. Oh, because I didn't save. That'll do it. Hold on. And here I'll show you outputs as well. So outputs is what we use to tell Turbo what we are caching. So .next, dist. There we go. So I use the outputs are relative to the project directory where you're building. So this app outputs the .next. This app, or this package outputs to dist. And it's not .dist, it is just dist. There we go. So now, if I delete dist, oh, and I'm sorry, I know why this is a cache hit. We do a little bit of an optimization here. We look and check your outputs before we try and restore from the cache. If your outputs are in place and haven't been touched, we don't even try because they still exist. There's no need to restore. So I have to actually remove it to get it to try and restore. So let me delete this. We're not going to be cached now. We're going to rebuild. We'll see we get cache miss. Great. If I rebuild full turbo, let me delete the dist from here. Still a full turbo, and it puts it right back because it just hasn't cached. So it knows we didn't change anything. So I'm going to delete this again. I'm going to change maybe my type to include an extra. Yeah, that sounds good. Build, and it automatically knows it's a cache miss because you changed the file. I have to rebuild that. I also have to rebuild everything that depends on it. Cool. Turborepo can do a bunch of other stuff. We're kind of short on time. I don't want to save time for questions. You can do a nice thing, really quickly generate a image of your dependencies. This is the dependency relationship for the restaurant data package right here. So app depends on it. Restaurant data also depends on this TS config. I'm just sharing configuration here in this library, and we also depend on that in the restaurant data package here. You can see this TS config. So you can get a little bit of information about your workspace as well. It'll show you that graph that it's constructing. But let me jump back here real quick to just so we can finish this up, and then we can go through any questions that anyone might have. So should I use it? I'm using it. I've been using this even before I worked at Purcell. This is just my personal websites. I have all of them in here, like contact information. I built our wedding website here. And the great thing about this is the sooner that you start working on this, or working in this way, it makes you more productive as you go because you start getting this collection of shared utilities that you can use everywhere and that you can continually keep up to date to benefit from. So I have, for example, shared utils, like just generic functions and utilities that you might use on any website, but I just have them in this Monorepo, and any app that I add or start building automatically is able to import these and use these right from the get-go. So it's a great system for just any small team or any small developer too. The alternatives, NX, Monorepo, we talked about these a little bit before. These are good alternatives. They do the same thing, but they're very heavy-handed, so if you don't want to go all in on them, it's tricky, or if you haven't started from scratch using them, it's tricky. Turborepo is much easier to adopt. You can also just use workspaces for your dependency management, but you're going to run into that task ordering problem. You're also going to run into the caching problem. But overall, monorepos are cool if you're used to once you get used to using them and their benefits and their drawbacks. They're really, really powerful, but also keep it simple. Don't over-optimize from the start. Everyone will tell you that. Thank you. We've got 8 minutes left. That's my contact information. If anybody ever wants to reach out or get in touch, all my social information and everything is there. So you can reach out to me there. But yes.